The Office of the Ombudsman is lifting restrictions on public access to the statements of assets, liabilities, and net worth or SALNs of government officials. A memorandum released on Tuesday, October 14, effectively reverses the policy imposed by former Ombudsman Samuel Martires. In a press briefing, Assistant Ombudsman Miko Clavano emphasizes the public's right to know how government officials acquire and manage their wealth.
This decision is guided by a simple principle. The public has a legitimate right to know how those in government acquire and manage their wealth. Transparency in this area is not a slogan. It is a safeguard against corruption and a deterrent to abuse of power. As the Ombudsman has emphasized, transparency is the name of the game. At a time when trust in institutions is tested, the best way to rebuild confidence is through openness backed by concrete access to information.
According to the memo, all SALNs filed with the Office of the Ombudsman shall be accessible to the public for inspection and reproduction during reasonable hours of working days, subject to reasonable limitations and procedural safeguards. Clavano says the Ombudsman is calling on all agencies, particularly the Civil Service Commission, the Office of the President, Congress, and the Judiciary, to align their practices with this policy. According to Clavano, the memorandum will take effect 15 days after its publication on October 14, and only then will the Office of the Ombudsman begin entertaining requests for copies of SALNs. Earlier, Remulla said he aimed to open the Ombudsman's doors to the public and make it a true sumbungan ng bayan. He said that his office will crowdsource information for lifestyle checks and complaints, noting that investigations would no longer rely solely on fact-finding teams. Remulla said the SALNs of former President Rodrigo Duterte, President Bongbong Marcos, and Vice President Sara Duterte would be among those accessible following the memorandum's release. Martires previously imposed restrictions on access to SALNs through Memorandum Circular No. 1 Series of 2020. The memorandum required anyone requesting a copy of a SALN to present a notarized letter of authority from the declarant, effectively barring the public and the media from obtaining the documents unless permitted by the official concerned. The Department of Justice turns over to the Office of the Ombudsman the department's findings for assessment and review following its investigation into alleged anomalous flood control projects. Prosecutor General Richard Anthony Fadulyon and DOJ Officer in Charge Frederick Vida formally transmitted the documents to Ombudsman Remulla on Tuesday, October 14. According to Fadulyon, they turned over 5 cases related to the alleged ghost flood control projects in Bulacan. Fadulyon says the cases involve contractors and Department of Public Works and Highways District Office officials. He adds that the cases include possible charges of malversation, falsification by public officers, perjury, and graft and corruption. Fadulyon says the department is waiting on the Ombudsman's directive on whether it can proceed with the preliminary investigation of these cases.
Ito po ay simula pa lamang ng investigasyon o pagsusuri na ginagawa ng department patungkol sa mga kaso na involved dito sa flood control. Ang ginagawa natin ngayon, kung saan yung mga mayroong ng ebidensyang malinaw na maaari na nating isampa at magsimula na ang preliminary investigation, ay ginagawa na po natin. Hindi po nangangahulugan na dito po nagtatapos. Ito po ay marami pang kasunod.
Upon his appointment as Ombudsman, Remulla vowed he would prioritize addressing the flood control corruption scandal. Amid public concern over why no one has been jailed yet in connection with anomalous flood control projects in the country, Malacanang urges the public to remain calm. In a briefing on Tuesday, October 14, Palace Press Officer Claire Castro assures that the government is doing everything to hold accountable those involved in the flood control controversy. She notes that the filing of cases could not be done overnight.
Okay. Kalma lang. Muli. Hindi po kasi ito nadadaan sa agad-agaran. Siguro bilang lawyer na ako ay mismong humahawak ng mga kaso at ako po ay humaharap mismo sa korte, kaya alam ko po kung paano ba magpresenta ng isang ebidensya.
Castro explains that it's better to gather as much solid evidence as possible before filing cases than to immediately file cases that might eventually be dismissed due to insufficient proof.
Hindi po ito nadadaan sa pabilisan. At kung ito naman ay mapapabilis, napakaganda ng numero, marami nasampa sa korte. Pero kalaunan, na-dismiss po lahat. Ano po ba ang mas hindi nyo tatanggapin? nakapagsampa ng maraming kaso pero na-dismiss po lahat dahil hindi hinog at kulang ang ebidensya. Hayaan po natin ang ICI na bumuo ng kanilang investigasyon at kumpletuhin ang dokumento. Ang pangako naman po nila after a week or rather week 4 ay makakapagsampa na sila ng mga kaso or makakapagrekomenda ng pagsampa ng kaso.
The Department of Justice earlier Tuesday turned over to the Office of the Ombudsman its findings on officials and contractors allegedly involved in anomalous flood control projects in Bulacan. Ombudsman Remulla vowed to prioritize cases related to the flood control corruption scandal. The Philippine government has lodged over 200 diplomatic protests against China since 2022 over its aggression in the West Philippine Sea. During the Senate Finance Committee hearing on Tuesday, October 14, Foreign Affairs Secretary Maria Teresa Lazaro says the number of diplomatic protests against China during President Bongbong Marcos' administration is now at 245. Of the total, Lazaro says the Philippines filed 47 diplomatic protests against China in 2025. While she initially claimed at the hearing that the latest diplomatic protest is filed against China for its aggression in Scarborough Shoal, she clarifies later on that they have yet to file a protest. She particularly says that they are set to file a protest for China's aggression on Sunday, October 12. The National Maritime Council said 3 BIFAR vessels were anchored near Pag-asa Island on Sunday, October 12. The BIFAR vessels were assisting Filipino fisherfolk under the Kadiwa para sa Bagong Bayaning Mangingisda program. According to the Philippine Coast Guard, Chinese Coast Guard and Chinese maritime militia vessels approached Philippine vessels and conducted dangerous maneuvers and activated their water cannons. A China Coast Guard vessel also deliberately rammed the stern of the BRP Datu Pagbuaya, causing minor structural damage but no injuries to the crew. The Philippine government maintained that Pag-asa Island is a territory of the Philippines as part of the Kalayaan Island Group of Palawan Province. In a separate incident, the PCG reported Chinese vessels' dangerous maneuvers and blocking actions in Scarborough Shoal on Monday, October 13. The PCG and Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources were distributing subsidies to Filipino fishers near the shoal. It also noted the presence of 11 China Coast Guard ships, 11 Chinese maritime militia vessels, 1 People's Liberation Army Navy helicopter, and 3 People's Liberation Army Navy vessel in the area.